you disgusting little brat!
Thanks for watching. Follow A Brighter Destiny for more powerful stories, and don't forget to subscribe.
The slap landed at 11:14 in the morning, and for 3 full seconds, nobody in Amber and Oak Coffee House made a sound. Not the espresso machine. Not the ceiling fans turning lazy circles against the July heat. Not the 2 college kids arguing softly about a startup pitch in the corner booth. A red handprint bloomed across Nathan Cole's cheek, just above the pale scar that ran along his jaw like a fault line in old rock, and he did not move. He did not raise his hand. He did not blink. He stood there in a faded olive green t-shirt with the sleeves cut short against the heat, holding his 6-year-old daughter against his chest, while the woman in front of him tried to catch her own breath after the fury that had made her strike him. Vivian Ashcroft expected him to fold. She expected an apology, maybe tears, maybe the particular kind of groveling she'd grown used to collecting from people who wore cargo shorts and $12 sandals. She had built an empire on the assumption that everyone eventually understood their place in a room she believed she owned. But Nathan only looked at her, and something in that stillness made the room itself feel like it was leaning backward, the way a crowd leans away from a live wire it can't quite see. Lily's small fingers curled tighter into his collar. "Daddy," she whispered, and her voice cracked down the middle. Nathan's palm moved slow circles across her back, the same rhythm he'd once used to steady wounded men in the back of a shaking Black Hawk, the same rhythm that now belonged only to a little girl in a yellow sundress with a strawberry milk stain on the hem. "I've got you, Bug," he said, so quiet it barely left his mouth. Then he looked at Vivian again. "Are you finished?" That was the moment real fear finally found its way into Vivian Ashcroft's eyes, though she wouldn't understand why for another 11 minutes. She had no idea that the man she'd just struck across the face wasn't a broke nobody in a beat-up truck. She didn't know that for 16 years, men in rooms with no windows had spoken his name the way people speak about weather systems, with respect and a little dread. She didn't know that the most dangerous thing about Nathan Cole was never what his hands could do. It was what he'd decided a long time ago they never would again. Stick around, because in about 90 seconds, this cafe stopped being a coffee shop and started being something closer to a courtroom. The morning had begun 3 hours earlier with sunscreen, a half-eaten waffle, and a promise. Nathan had picked the corner table at Amber and Oak on purpose, the one with a clean sightline to the front door, the side exit by the restrooms, and the register. Old habits didn't retire just because the man wearing them did. He sat with his back near the wall and his shoulders loose enough that nobody paid him any mind, which was exactly the point. To the room, he looked like any tired 39 to 45-year-old dad in a faded t-shirt, gray cargo shorts, and scuffed tan boots that had clearly seen more dirt than this particular zip code. A soldier, though, would have clocked the rest of it in half a second. The way his forearms rested flat and easy on the table. The scar. The breathing that never sped up. Across from him, Lily Cole was demolishing a blueberry scone with the seriousness of a structural engineer. She wore a yellow cotton sundress covered in embroidered ladybugs, mismatched flip-flops, one purple, one glitter pink, because Nathan had long since learned which battles were worth fighting before 8 in the morning. Her mother, Emily, had died when Lily was 3 after a 19-month fight with leukemia that had emptied Nathan's savings account down to $411.80, along with most of his sleep and every illusion he'd carried out of 2 decades in Army Special Operations that combat had taught him everything about pain. He'd been a command sergeant major then, the senior enlisted man on a Delta squadron. The kind of soldier sent into buildings that official records insisted never existed. He'd pulled men out of burning vehicles in Kandahar and out of a collapsed embassy annex in a country he still wasn't allowed to name in casual conversation. None of it had prepared him to sit beside Emily's hospital at 2 in the morning while she got smaller under the sheets and whispered, "Promise me she'll still laugh." So he retired. He packed his medals into a shoebox Lily had never once asked to open, moved from Fort Bragg to a rented 3-bedroom in Nashville near her school, and rebuilt his whole life around carpool lines, grocery lists, and the sacred, unglamorous work of keeping one little girl's world soft. That morning, Lily had gone 6 straight nights without waking up, crying, so Nathan had said yes to the strawberry milk with extra ice. He'd said yes to the blueberry scone too, because sometimes a father celebrates victories nobody else will ever see on a scoreboard. "Can we go to the splash pad after this?" Lily asked, cheeks full of scone. "Only if you finish that without wearing half of it," Nathan said. And when he smiled, the hard lines in his face briefly remembered a version of himself from before deserts and doors kicked in at 3 a.m. She looked down at the crumbs scattered across her lap. "Too late. Then we negotiate." She laughed, and the sound did something to him no metal ever had. Amber and Oak was crowded that Thursday with tech founders and venture capital associates in linen blazers. Despite the 94-degree heat outside, laptops open, iced oat milk lattes sweating rings onto reclaimed wood tables. It was exactly the kind of place Nathan usually avoided. Too many exits blocked by furniture, too many phones, too many people who confused the size of a bank account with the size of a soul. But Lily loved their strawberry milk with the little whipped cream swirl on top, so they came anyway. Love, he'd learned, often means walking into rooms you'd rather skip because someone small is happy there. Then Vivian Ashcroft walked in, and she did not enter like a customer. She arrived like a hostile takeover in a white linen suit and $4,326 snakeskin heels, sunglasses pushed up into hair that had clearly cost more than Nathan's truck payment. 2 assistants trailing her with tablets and visible terror on their faces. Behind her moved Marcus Doyle, her bodyguard, a broad-shouldered man in a black suit whose eyes swept the room with a familiarity that had nothing to do with retail security work. Vivian was 44, founder and CEO of Meridian Aerotech, a defense and satellite manufacturing company with contracts worth more than the annual budget of some small nations. Business magazines called her a visionary. Former employees, when they spoke at all, called her something else entirely. That morning, she'd flown into Nashville to close a $2,870,000,000 Department of Defense contract, and the 12-hour delay in the paperwork had put her into the kind of mood that made everyone within 30 feet of her lower their voices. "I don't care what legal thinks," she snapped into her phone, cutting straight to the front of the line. "If they can't have clean language by 4 o'clock, replace them. I'm not losing $3 billion because somebody in compliance grew a conscience overnight." A young man in a startup hoodie glanced up from his laptop. "Excuse me, the line's back there." Vivian lowered her sunglasses just enough to look at him over the rim. "I make more before 10 a.m. than you'll make your entire life." Don't confuse proximity with relevance. He flushed and stepped back. A few people stared at their drinks a little too intently. Wealth, Nathan noted without a flicker of expression, has a way of making cruelty look like manners to the people who benefit from it. Meanwhile, Lily had decided, very seriously, to throw away her own napkin like a big kid. She slid out of the booth holding her cup of strawberry milk in both hands, humming a cartoon theme song under her breath, 11 feet of open floor between her and the trash can. Nathan tracked her the way he tracked everything, without meaning to. Path mostly clear. One variable closing fast from the pastry case, eyes down on a phone, speed too high for the distance. "Lily, hold up," he said, low and even, the kind of voice that cuts through a room without ever rising. She froze halfway. Vivian rounded the pastry display at the exact same second, still reading a text, and walked straight into her. The cup burst against the floor. Pink milk sprayed across the polished concrete and speckled the white toe of Vivian's heels. Lily went down hard, landing on her backside with a small, surprised gasp that turned every cell in Nathan's body cold in under a second. The whole cafe stopped breathing. Vivian looked down not at the child first, but at her shoes. Her face didn't shift toward concern. It shifted toward rage. "You disgusting little brat," she snapped. Lily's eyes filled instantly. "I'm sorry. Do you have any idea, Z, what these cost?" Vivian's voice climbed, sharp enough to turn heads 3 tables over. "Where is your parent? Who lets a child run around like an animal?" She reached down like she meant to grab Lily's arm. She never got the chance. Nathan was already there, and nobody in that cafe could later agree on exactly how he'd crossed 6 feet of floor without seeming to move at all. He didn't shove her. He didn't raise his voice. He simply placed his body between Vivian Ashcroft and his daughter, the way you place a hand over a flame before it reaches something that matters. "Step back," he said. Vivian flinched half a step, startled by the suddenness of him, and for a fraction of a second some old animal instinct told her she was standing too close to something she didn't understand. Pride buried that instinct fast. She looked him over the faded t-shirt, the scuffed boots, the cracked leather watchband, and made her calculation in under 2 seconds. Poor, powerless, dismissible. She would spend the rest of the day discovering how wrong that math was. Nathan crouched, never taking his eyes off her, and lifted Lily gently into his arms. She buried her wet face in his shoulder. "You're okay, Bug," he murmured. "I've got you." Then he stood and faced Vivian squarely. "You ran into her because you were staring at your phone. You're going to apologize to my daughter. Then you're going to walk away." Vivian laughed, short and brittle. "Apologize? To her? Your little feral creature just ruined a $4,000 pair of shoes." "Shoes can be replaced," Nathan said. "Remember that line for me." It landed harder than he expected. A woman near the register looked down at her cup. A barista stopped mid-wipe on the counter. The young man in the hoodie quietly raised his phone. "Listen to me," Vivian hissed, stepping closer. "I am Vivian Ashcroft. I buy and sell companies before most people finish breakfast. I'm in this city to close a contract that would pay for your entire miserable life about 10,000 times over. And if you think I'm going to stand here and take a lecture from some off-brand cowboy and his badly dressed kid, Lily, flinched at the word kid, shrinking further into Nathan's neck. "Don't talk about my daughter again," Nathan said. His voice hadn't changed volume at all. That was what made it terrifying. Vivian's face flushed with humiliation in front of an audience that was now, very obviously, watching her instead of admiring her. "Or what?" she snapped. He looked at her the way a locked door looks at someone rattling the handle. "Or you'll regret it," he said, so calmly it barely qualified as a threat. "I'll call Child Protective Services," Vivian said, panic and rage tangled together now. "I'll tell them you assaulted me. I'll have her taken from you before your dinner gets cold. People like you always have something to hide." That was the moment Nathan considered, very briefly, ending this conversation in a way this room would remember for years. Not because of the insults aimed at him. Men had tried to break him in 4 different languages and failed. It was the threat against Lily. Emily's last laugh in this world, the promise he'd made over a hospital bed. His heart rate, if anyone had checked, was shown it slowing down, not speeding up. "You're done talking," he said. "Leave." But Vivian Ashcroft had lived a long time without consequences finding her, and rage made her reckless in exactly the way privilege always eventually does. She pulled back her hand and slapped him across the face with everything her arm had in it. "Now you're caught back up to where we started." A milk pitcher slipped out of a barista's hand and somewhere behind the counter and rang against the tile. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Lily whimpered against Nathan's collar. And Nathan did absolutely nothing, no flinch, no retreat, no reflex toward retaliation. And that stillness broke something loose in the room that shouting never could have. "Are you finished?" he asked again, flat as a closed door. That's when the glass front door slammed open, and Marcus Doyle shoved through the crowd, one hand already reaching inside his jacket. "Ma'am, step back!" Then, to Nathan, "You, put the kid down and back off before I put you on the floor." Nathan didn't move. Marcus took 2 more steps forward. Then his eyes caught the faded edge of a tattoo peeking out from under Nain's sleeve where the fabric had shifted while he held Lily a shape that looked, to almost anyone else, like nothing at all. Marcus stopped so fast his dress shoes squeaked against the floor. All the color drained out of his face. 9 years earlier, Marcus Doyle had carried a memory out of Kunar province that still woke him up sweating some nights. A ranger element pinned down for 14 hours in rock and dust, 2 men bleeding out, radios dying under static. Marcus had been younger then, louder, certain fear was something other men confessed to. By hour 13, he'd learned better. They'd been waiting to die when 4 shapes came down off the ridge, with no lights and no hesitation. Delta. They'd moved through that valley like a verdict. The man who'd dragged Marcus's medic out through open fire, taking 2 rounds against his plate carrier without slowing down, had turned once under moonlight so Marcus could see the scar along his jaw. Command Sergeant Major Nathan Cole. Men in that world called him the Ghost of Kandahar in the rare moments they said his name at all. And Marcus was now standing 4 feet from him in a coffee shop in Nashville, having just threatened to put him on the floor. He raised both hands, palms out. "Sergeant Major," he said, and his voice cracked clean down the middle. "I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you. The cafe went so quiet you could hear the ice settling in somebody's abandoned cold brew." Vivian stared at her bodyguard. "Marcus, what are you doing?" He didn't look at her. "Ma'am," he said, low and urgent, "you need to apologize right now. Then we need to leave." "Apologize? Have you lost your mind?" "He threatened me." Marcus finally turned to her, and whatever she saw on his face made her take a step back. It wasn't fear of losing his paycheck. It was pity. "No, ma'am. You threatened his kid, and then you hit him in front of 40 witnesses." He pulled his earpiece out and dropped it on the floor. "I quit." Vivian's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I appreciate what you were trying to do," Nathan said quietly to Marcus. "You were doing your job." "No, sir," Marcus said. "I was doing hers." That sentence went through the room like a blade. Phone stayed raised now, recording something that had shifted from a confrontation into a reversal, a billionaire in white losing control of the very man paid to enforce her will. Vivian looked around and understood, for the first time in longer than she could remember, that the people watching her were not afraid. They were judging. "This is absurd," she snapped, panic sharpening her voice. "I don't care what costume soldier fantasy the 2 of you are sharing. I'm here to close a $2,870,000,000 contract with the Department of Defense. I have senators who return my calls. I have generals who know my name. I'm not going to be humiliated by a washed-up veteran and a coward with an earpiece." Nathan shifted Lily slightly against his hip. "Take the loss and go," he said. "My loss?" She laughed, high and wild. "You think this is over? I'll call General Reyes right now. He handles special ops, acquisitions. Personally, he'll have local police carry you out of here, and by tonight your daughter will be in a county office while they investigate whether a violent man should be raising her." Marcus said her name once, warning in it. She was already dialing, phone on speaker, held up like a weapon. It rang twice. A deep, irritated voice answered. "Vivian, this had better be about the final contract language." "Robert," she said, snapping into a tone so polished it sounded rehearsed, I've just been assaulted in a coffee shop downtown. Some unstable civilian threatened me after his kid destroyed a pair of my shoes, and my own bodyguard is refusing to intervene, because apparently he knows the man." A pause. "Call local police, Vivian." "I'm in a briefing." He called him Sergeant Major, she said, glaring at Nathan. Some scar on his jaw, some tattoo, and Marcus is acting like he's seen a ghost. The line went silent. Not quiet silent. The specific silence of someone recalculating everything they thought they knew about the next 5 minutes. "Describe him again," General Reyes said, very slowly. I just did. Faded green shirt, scar, tattoo, holding some crying kid. Another pause, longer this time. Put him on the phone, Reyes said. Now. Nathan leaned toward the speaker without taking it from her hand. Reyes, he said. It's Cole. On the other end, somewhere inside a secure office at the Pentagon, General Robert Reyes closed his eyes and lowered his forehead into one hand. He knew that voice. Every senior officer who'd ever worked adjacent to special operations knew that voice. Nathan Cole had pulled downed pilots out of valleys nobody officially entered and dragged hostages out of buildings that didn't exist on any map handed to Congress. Reyes didn't just respect him. He owed him 3 men who still had grandchildren because of a decision Nathan made in about 4 seconds, 16 years ago. Nathan, Reyes said, and the whole room heard the reverence folded into that one syllable. It's been a long time. How's Lily? Vivian's face went the color of the linen suit. She was having a good morning, Nathan said. Then your contractor ran into her, screamed in her face, threatened to have her taken away from me, and slapped me across the face when I asked her to apologize. The pause that followed felt endless. She hit you, Reyes said. It wasn't a question. She did. Robert, wait. Vivian broke in, panic climbing fast now. He intimidated me. His child was reckless. I. Stop talking, Reyes snapped, hard enough that Vivian actually flinched. You are standing in front of a man who has done more for this country than your entire boardroom could understand if I briefed them for a month. The fact that you struck him and are still standing on your own 2 feet is not a demonstration of your power. It's a demonstration of his restraint. Robert, the contract. There is no more contract. Effective immediately, Meridian Aerotech is suspended from all Department of Defense acquisition discussions pending a full compliance review. You can't do that. I can, and I just did. My board will sue. Your board is about to be very busy with federal auditors. If your judgment lets you assault a decorated veteran and threaten his 6-year-old daughter in a public coffee shop, I have serious concerns about your judgment handling classified satellite systems. Don't call this number again unless your legal counsel's is on the line. His voice softened only when it turned back toward Nathan. Nathan, I'm sorry. Truly, give Lily my best. The call ended. Vivian stood in the middle of the cafe, phones raised, face stripped of every ounce of color. In under 3 minutes, in front of baristas and venture capitalists, and one small girl with tear tracks on her cheeks, the foundation of her empire had cracked wide open. Stay with me here, because the story isn't actually about the crack. It's about what grows in it afterward. Blue and red lights hit the front windows a moment later. 2 Nashville police officers came through the door, hands near their belts, taking in the shattered cup, the pink puddle on the floor, the trembling billionaire, and the father holding a child with a visible red mark on his own face. We got a call about a disturbance, the older officer, Officer Boone, said. Vivian lunged toward them like they were a life raft. Officers, thank God, arrest him. He threatened me, his child attacked me, and my own bodyguard has clearly lost his mind. Boone looked at Nathan, then at Lily, then at the handprint fading slowly on Nathan's cheek. Before Nathan could answer, the young man in the hoodie stood up, voice shaking but steady enough to carry. Officer, she's lying. I recorded the whole thing. She cut the line, insulted 3 different people, ran into the little girl, screamed at her, threatened the father, then slapped him. I've got mine too, a woman near the register said. So do I, said someone from the back. 3 angles. The kid did absolutely nothing wrong, the hoodie kid added. For the first time all morning, Vivian Ashcroft had no room left to rewrite what had happened. Officer Boone sighed with the tired patience of a man who'd watched powerful people expect the law to bend around their shoes one too many times. Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back. Absolutely not. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are right now, ma'am. You're under arrest for assault. The handcuffs clicked shut, and that sound changed the room more than General Reyes's phone call had. The call had wounded her company. The cuffs touched her skin. Vivian started shouting then, threatening lawsuits and careers and city officials, and nobody in that cafe moved to help her. Marcus stood off to one side, face grim. The baristas watched. The phones kept recording. Nathan turned Lily gently away so she wouldn't have to watch the rest of it. When the officers walked Vivian toward the door, she looked back once, hatred and fear tangled together on her face. Nathan didn't return either one. He wasn't gloating. Revenge hadn't brought him across that cafe floor. Love had. That was the whole of it. A barista named Dana came over. Once the door swung shut behind the last flash of a police light, hands still shaking slightly. "Sir, I'm so sorry. We'll replace the cup, the milk, all of it, and whatever she said to you." Nathan shook his head. "It's all right." "No," Dana said, surprising herself with the firmness in it. "It wasn't." He looked at her and nodded once. "No, it wasn't." Lily lifted her head off his shoulder, eyes red. "Daddy, I dropped the cup. That nearly broke him more than the slap had." Not the threats, not the memories Marcus's recognition had stirred loose. Just a 6-year-old apologizing for a cup while her own cheeks were still wet from being screamed at by a stranger. "Cups can be replaced, Bug," he said, kissing the top of her head. She was mad. "Because of me?" "No," he said, voice softening into something the whole cafe could feel. "Because some people carry storms around inside them, and they blame whoever's closest when it finally rains." Lily considered that with the total seriousness only children bring to things adults have made complicated. "Do we still get the splash pad?" A small astonished laugh moved through the room. Nathan smiled, real and warm for the first time all morning. "We still get the splash pad. And ice cream after." "Now you're negotiating like a professional," she said, and somewhere behind them, someone actually applauded once before catching themselves. Marcus stepped closer, slower now, more careful. Sergeant Major Nathan looked at him. "Kunar," Marcus said quietly, "you got Delgado out." "Our medic. He's got 3 kids now," Nathan said. It wasn't a question. "He talks about you every year on the anniversary." Nathan looked away for a second. The past was a country he didn't take visitors to. "Take care of yourself," he said, which both of them understood as a kind dismissal. Before he turned to go, Marcus glanced down at Lily. "Your dad's a good man," he told her. Lily sniffled, resting her cheek back against Nathan's shoulder. "I know," she said, and the answer made the whole cafe go quiet again gently, this time. By that afternoon, the video had crossed 6 figures in views. Local news picked it up first, with the easy language of outrage billionaire CEO slaps single father in Nashville coffee cup. But by evening, veterans across the country had started identifying Nathan, not with classified specifics, but with enough reverence to change the whole tone of the conversation online. Retired Ranger recognizes Delta legend. Contractor loses $2.8 billion Pentagon deal after public assault. That was the moment 3 other voices decided it was finally safe to speak. Renee Ortiz, a former quality control engineer at Meridian Aerotech, posted a statement the next morning describing how she'd been fired 11 months earlier after flagging a wiring defect in a satellite guidance module, and how Vivian had told her, verbatim, in front of 6 other engineers, that engineers who couldn't meet deadlines could go find work somewhere their conscience was welcome. Michael Grant, a former executive assistant, came forward with 3 years of documented emails showing a pattern of screamed corrections over typos and missed calls at midnight. Diane Walsh, a former production floor supervisor in Meridian's Huntsville plant, described being demoted after reporting unsafe overtime conditions, then quietly pushed out 6 weeks later. None of the 3 had ever met Nathan Cole. None of them needed to. They'd simply been waiting, the way people sometimes wait years for a room to finally believe them. Federal auditors announced a formal review within 72 hours. The Department of Defense confirmed all pending Meridian acquisition talks were frozen. Vivian's legal team issued a 2-paragraph statement about a stressful misunderstanding. The internet replayed the slap several million times, and did not misunderstand a single frame of it. Nathan's first instinct, old training kicking back in, was to disappear, protect the perimeter, control the exposure, keep Lily off any camera that mattered. But that evening, while lily-colored ladybugs at their kitchen table, Nathan stood at the sink and realized something heavier than anything he'd carried out of combat. Lily had watched a powerful adult hurt someone and lie about it in the same breath. She'd also watched a bodyguard tell the truth at real cost, a general defend a stranger's honor over the phone, and her own father refuse violence when violence would have been the easy answer. That lesson mattered more than any headline. Was that lady bad? Lily asked without looking up from her purple marker. Nathan dried his hands slowly and sat across from her. Emily would have known exactly what to say here. He'd spent too many years learning the hard truths instead. She did a bad thing, he said. But is she bad? I don't know, Bug. Sometimes people build a whole life where nobody ever tells them no. Then the first time somebody does, all the ugly they've been storing up comes out at once. Do you think she's sorry? He thought about Vivian's face as the cuffs went on. Fear, rage, humiliation, plenty of that. Sorrow hadn't shown up yet. I hope she gets there, he said. That's a different thing than being sorry right now. Lily nodded, coloring in a wing. You didn't hit her back. No. Were you scared? Not of her. Then why didn't you? He looked down at his own hands, hands trained for years to break locks and take lives, now mostly used for ponytails, dishes, and steadying a little girl after the world had knocked her down. Being strong doesn't mean doing everything you're capable of doing, he said. Sometimes it means choosing what not to do. Lily thought about that, like it was the same as not eating all her ice cream sprinkles at once. Nathan laughed, exactly like that, and for the first time since the slap, the day felt survivable. 4 days later, a letter arrived by courier. Not an email, not a statement drafted by a communications team. Handwritten, on heavy cream paper, with crossed-out lines where the pen had clearly pressed too hard. Nathan almost threw it out the second he saw the name at the bottom. Lily was at school. The house was quiet. Something in him decided that not reading it gave it more power over him than actually opening it would. Vivian wrote that she'd watched the video twice with Tasnistov because she stand to hear herself. She wrote that her father had told her, at 26, that no woman would ever hold a defense company together, and that somewhere in the years since, she'd started mistaking cruelty for strength because cruelty got faster results. She wrote that none of it excused anything. She didn't ask him to speak to the press on her behalf. She didn't ask to meet Lily. Near the bottom, one line stopped him cold. I watched your daughter apologize for a cup I broke inside her, and I understood all at once that I had become someone children are afraid of. Nathan folded the letter and sat with it a long time. The first hearing a week later was packed. Reporters filled the back rows. A scattering of veterans stood quietly along one wall, uninvited, unorganized, simply present. Marcus sat 2 rows behind Nathan. Vivian entered without the white suit, without sunglasses, without an entourage. She wore a plain navy dress and looked, for the first time anyone in that room had ever seen, smaller than the space around her. The judge reviewed the assault charge, the disturbing the peace citation, and 11 separate pieces of video evidence. Vivian's attorney rose, polished, and ready to soften every rough edge of the story. Vivian touched his sleeve and shook her head. Then she stood on her own. Your Honor, she said, voice unsteady but audible, I don't contest the facts. I struck Mr. Cole. I threatened him. I frightened his daughter. I lied to the responding officers. There's no context that makes any of that acceptable. Her attorney closed his eyes. Cameras clicked. The judge leaned forward slightly. You understand the consequences of that statement? Yes, Vivian said, and turned, just slightly, toward Nathan. Mr. Cole, I'm sorry. Not because I lost a contract, and not because I got arrested. Because your daughter was hurt, and for one moment I made her believe she'd done something wrong just by existing in my way. Nathan said nothing. The room held its breath. I can't undo that, Vivian said. I can only name it. The judge ordered UC service, mandatory anger management counseling, a public apology, and restitution to Amber and Oak. The assault charge stayed on her record. Outside, reporters shouted questions that both of them ignored. On the courthouse steps, she spoke to his back. Sergeant Major. He stopped, but didn't turn right away. I don't deserve forgiveness, she said. Nobody does, he said, turning to face her. Not really. Some people just get to keep trying. Her eyes filled, but she held herself together. Will she be all right? Nathan looked toward the sidewalk where Lily waited with Marcus's wife, eating a granola bar and swinging her legs. She has questions. Children shouldn't have to, Vivian said. No, he agreed. They shouldn't. Vivian took a breath. I've resigned this morning from the company. The board would have removed me eventually, but I wanted my own signature on it. For a moment, the woman who had once claimed to own people stood on those steps with nothing left to command. What will you do? Nathan asked. She looked down at her own hands. Learn how not to be obeyed, she said, and it was the first thing all week that hadn't sounded rehearsed. Nathan nodded once. Not forgiveness, not friendship, just acknowledgement sometimes, the only mercy the truth allows on day one. 6 months later, the story had mostly settled into the shape people like their stories to take: the slap, the frozen bodyguard, the general's phone call, the cuffs. Those pieces had rhythm. They were easy to repeat around a dinner table. But Nathan never told it that way when Lily asked. He talked about the splash pad afterward, the ice cream with too many sprinkles, and the way the kid in the hoodie had stood up when telling the truth was still genuinely scary to do. Under new interim leadership, Meridian Aerotech settled with all 3 whistleblowers, reinstated a formal safety reporting channel with actual teeth behind it, and quietly rehired 2 engineers who'd been pushed out for raising concerns nobody wanted to hear a year earlier. Renee Ortiz was promoted to head of quality assurance. Federal auditors closed their review with a list of mandate reforms instead of criminal referrals, on the condition every one of them was implemented within 18 months. It wasn't redemption exactly. It was closer to repair. Marcus visited once with Delgado. The medic Nathan had pulled out of Kunar years earlier, now walking with a cane and carrying photos of 3 kids on his phone. Lily made all 3 grown men sit cross-legged on the living room floor and judge a butterfly drawing contest with total seriousness. Nathan watched 2 combat veterans laugh under paper wings taped to the wall and thought again of Emily's last request. Promise you'll still laugh. She did. Not every day, and not without shadows some afternoons. But she laughed. As for Vivian, she disappeared from headlines after donating most of her severance to a veterans family fund and a childhood trauma counseling program in Nashville. Some called it image repair. Maybe part of it was. People rarely become entirely new versions of themselves overnight, and grace isn't a magic trick that erases what came before it. But once, about 6 months after the Café, a small package arrived at Nathan's door with no return address. Inside was a ceramic cup painted with tiny yellow ladybugs, clearly chosen by someone who'd spent far too long deciding whether sending anything at all was appropriate. No long letter this time. Just a card with 7 words on it. Cups can be replaced. Childhood cannot. Nathan showed it to Lily. She ran one finger along the painted wing and said, "She learned. Maybe she's starting to," Nathan said, looking out the kitchen window where the late July light was turning gold against the fence line. "Starting is good," Lily said. "Yeah, bug," he said. "Starting is good." That evening, they took the new cup to the splash pad, filled with strawberry milk from home, because Lily had decided, with total 6-year-old authority, that cafe milk was now too dramatic. They sat on a bench under a row of crepe myrtles while kids shrieked and ran through the spray, the Tennessee sky sliding from gold into that particular deep blue that only shows up in July. Lily leaned against his side, safe and warm, her feet swinging above the mulch. The mark on his cheek had healed weeks ago. The video had faded into the churn of whatever came next online. But something quiet had settled in him that hadn't been there before. He'd spent most of his adult life measuring strength by missions completed and men brought home alive. Then he'd measured it by surviving grief without letting it swallow his daughter's whole childhood. That morning in the cafe had taught him a third kind of strength, one nobody had ever put a medal on. The strength to stand between cruelty and someone small without becoming cruel himself. The strength to absorb humiliation in front of a room full of strangers and not pass a single ounce of it back down the line. If somebody's mean again, Lily asked, chocolate milk, mustache on her lip, will you still not hit them? Nathan wiped it away with a napkin. I'll always protect you. But, Will, you stay quiet. He looked out across the park, where the last of the evening light caught the spray from the splash pad. If quiet's enough, he said, then quiet's what I'll do. And if it's not, he kissed the top of her head, then I'll still be your dad first, always that, before anything else I ever was. She accepted that completely and went back to her milk. Dignity, Nathan had come to understand, is not weakness dressed up politely for company. It's power that has decided on purpose to stay in its holster. It's the hand that doesn't strike back because a 6-year-old is watching every single thing you do with it. And grace is whatever's left standing after the noise clears out. The cameras move on to the next outrage once the world stops cheering for punishment and finally starts listening for what can still be repaired. That morning, a billionaire thought she'd slapped a nobody in a coffee shop. Instead, she struck a mirror, and in the silence that followed, everybody in that room saw exactly who they actually were. In life, real strength is rarely about how loudly you can assert yourself or how much power sits in your name. It's about how you carry yourself through the storms you didn't choose. Nathan Cole, a father and a former soldier, shows us that courage is often quiet, built out of restraint instead of retaliation. He could have unleashed everything 16 years of training had put in his hands. Instead, he chose patience, calm, and the fierce protection of the one thing that mattered more than being right. This story is a reminder that dignity was never weakness, and that grace was never about forgetting what was done to you. It's about choosing what matters over what merely hurt. Every one of us runs into our own version of that coffee shop sooner or later, a moment when patience, love, and quiet courage all get tested at once. How we answer that moment shapes more than our own character. It becomes the example somebody smaller than us is quietly learning to follow. So take a second today and ask yourself honestly, when life tests you like that, will you choose the reaction or the restraint? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if a moment of quiet strength has ever changed a room you were standing in. If this story moved you even a little, hit like and subscribe, and stick around for more true-to-life stories about dignity, second chances, and the kind of strength that never needs to raise its voice. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction, created for entertainment and educational purposes only. All characters, names, businesses, and events depicted are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or dead, or any actual establishment. Any resemblance to real persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of human dignity, workplace ethics, and social justice through narrative storytelling. It does not make factual claims about any individual, company, or institution.